The sum total of all the sampling events by which an object inscribes itself on other objects is a history, in both senses of that wonderfully ambivalent Greek term, since history can mean events and recording. Hyperobjects have a history of their own, not simply insofar as they interact with humans. This history is strictly the time of hyperobjects. Raindrops splatter on the ground in Western California. They record the history of El Niño, a massive weather system in the Pacific. In particular, they record how the Japanese tsunami scooped up some of El Niño and dumped it on trees and hills and other objects in the object called the USA. El Niño itself is the footprint of a hyperobject called global warming. Another footprint may well have been the Japanese earthquake itself, since the changing oceanic temperature may have changed the pressure on the Earth's crust, resulting in an earthquake. The quake destroyed 4 nuclear reactors. Quanta from these reactors, known as alpha, beta, and gamma particles, inscribe themselves in soft tissue around the world. We are living textbooks on global warming and nuclear materials, crisscrossed with interobjective calligraphy. This is the historical moment at which hyperobjects become visible by humans. This visibility changes everything. We humans enter a new age of sincerity, which contains an intrinsic irony that is beyond the aestheticized, slightly plastic irony of the postmodern age. What do I mean? This is a momentous historical era at which humans achieve what has sometimes been called ecological awareness. Ecological awareness is a detailed and increasing sense, in science and outside of it, of the innumerable interrelationships among life forms and between life and non-life. Now, this awareness has some very strange properties. First of all, the awareness ends the idea that we are living in an environment. This is totally weird. This is so weird that we should dwell on it a little. What it means is that the more we know about the interconnection, the more it becomes impossible to posit some kind of entity existing beyond or behind the interrelated beings. When we look at the environment, what we find are discrete life forms, non-life, and their relationships, but no matter how hard we look, we won't find a container in which they all fit. In particular, we won't find an umbrella that unifies them, such as world, environment, ecosystem, or even, astonishingly, Earth. What we discover instead is an open-ended mesh that consists of grass, iron ore, popsicles, sunlight, the galaxy Sagittarius, and mushroom spores. Earth exists, no doubt, but not as some special enormous bowl that contains all the ecological objects. Earth is one object coexisting with mice, sugar, elephants, and Turin. Of course, there are many scenarios in which if Earth ceased to exist, Turin and mice would be in trouble. But if the mice were shot into space aboard a friendly extraterrestrial freighter, Earth wouldn't be the cause of their death. Even Turin might be rebuilt brick by brick on some other world. By mesh, I mean something disturbingly entangled, without center or edge, so finely interwoven that everything is caught in it. I also mean something that appears to us, since mesh stems from the word mask. A mesh is a screen of finely interwoven links. Is there anything behind it? Suddenly we discover the second astonishing thing. Mice are surely mice, no matter what we call them, but mice remain mice as long as they survive to pass on their genome. It's what neo-Darwinism calls satisficing. Satisficing is a performative standard for existing, and there is no mouse-flavored DNA. There isn't even any DNA-flavored DNA. It's a palimpsest of mutations, viral code insertions, and so on. There isn't even any life-flavored life. DNA requires ribosomes, and ribosomes require DNA. So to break the vicious cycle, there must have been an RNA world of RNA attached to a non-organic replicator, such as a silicate crystal. So there is a mouse. This is not a nominalist, nor is it an idealist argument, certainly not. But the mouse is a non-mouse, or what I call a strange stranger. Even more weirdly, this is why the mouse is real. The fact that wherever we look we can't find a mouse is the very reason why it exists. Now, we can say this about everything in the universe, but one of the most obvious things we can say this about is a hyperobject. This is because hyperobjects are so huge and so long-lasting compared with humans that they obviously seem both vivid and highly unreal for exactly the same reasons. Hyperobjects such as global warming and nuclear radiation surround us, not some abstract entity such as nature or environment or world. Our reality has become more real in the sense of more vivid and intense, and yet it has also become less knowable as some one-sided, facile thing. Again, for exactly the same reasons. In Berkeley, California, radiation levels in water a couple of months ago spiked 181 times higher than normal because of the Sendai reactor meltdowns. We know this. We know that we are bathed in alpha, beta, and gamma rays emanating from the dust particles that now span the globe. These particles coexist with us. They aren't part of some enormous bowl called nature. They are beings like us, strange strangers. Should we stop drinking water? Should we stop drinking cow's milk because cows eat grass which drinks rainwater? The more we know, the harder it is to make a one-sided decision about anything. As we enter the time of hyperobjects, nature disappears and all the modern certainties that seem to accompany it. What remains is a vastly more complex situation that is uncanny and intimate at the same time. There is no exit from this situation. Thus the time of hyperobjects is a time of sincerity, that is, a time in which it's impossible to achieve a final distance towards the world, but for this very reason it's also a time of irony. We realize after we discover hyperobjects that non-human entities exist that are incomparably vaster and more powerful than us and that our reality is caught in them. What things are and how they seem and how we know them is full of gaps, yet vividly real. Real entities contain time and space, exhibiting non-local effects and other interobjective phenomena, writing us into their histories. Astonishingly then, the mesh of interconnection is secondary to the strange stranger. The mesh is an emergent property of the things that coexist and not the other way around. For the modernist mind, accustomed to systems and structures, this is an astounding, shocking discovery. The more maps we make, the more real things tear through them. Non-human entities emerge through our mapping, then they destroy them. Thus the time of hyperobjects is an art that does the art of the time of hyperobjects is an art that explores the uncanniness of beings, the uniqueness of beings, the irony of interrelationships between beings, and the ironic secondariness of the intermeshing between beings. The art that explores the hyperobject appears spontaneously within contemporary art because of non-humans. Human artists did nothing to make them appear. Of course there is art that thematizes global warming and so on, but even this art is a function of the sudden appearance of hyperobjects in front of the human structural tendency, like those 3D images of cups, of flowers, that appear in front of a magic eye picture. But again, just like those very pictures, it turns out that the non-humans were there all along.